Hello all, that is us live for our Loki Community Call. I was actually saying to Nicole just before it started, I think we're coming up to our year anniversary of taking over the Loki Community Calls and running them with the Loki engineers team and so forth. So it's been quite an exciting journey from start to finish.
Well, I think you're jumping the gun a little bit, but we can pre-celebrate the celebration.
Yeah. Well, I'm pseudo saying we took it over because we, as you said, we took over one of the community calls before it initially started, and then so we actually have a really special community call today because we are doing this community call with Jan-Otto, who actually doesn't work for Grafana Labs, but has contributed significantly to the development of Loki through the Loki Helm. He is part of our new initiative, which is the Loki Helm Maintainers. We're going to be referring to Jan-Otto as Joe today. That's the name we all like to refer to him as, just to connect the dots as we go. But Joe, would you like to introduce yourself? What do you do on a daily basis? And kind of what got you started with Loki?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'm Jan-Otto Kröpke, in short Joe. That's what my friends normally name me. And I'm a cloud architect this time. So I'm moved from the observability engineering to more bigger cloud view. And I start with Loki. It was before COVID, so 29. This is a long year. And so aside from my work, I'm also doing much in open source. I have personal projects. I am also participate in the Prometheus ecosystem as maintainer and as well at Grafana. And I'm happy to have a great community. Even Grafana was the first company that sent me a shirt for contributions. And it's really great to be part of the meeting today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. And I should introduce my lovely colleagues from the Grafana side as well. Always my hostess with the mostest, Nicole. Would you like to introduce yourself? And then we also have
I'm on the other side.
Again, I keep doing this. Like, I do that. It looks right on my screen.
Hi, I'm Nicole van der Hoeven. Hey, did you introduce yourself, Jay? This is Jay Clifford.
I do this every time.
I don't know if he said it. We are developer advocates at Grafana Labs, and we routinely mess this part up. Yes, the part with our names. Julie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Julie Stickler. I am the technical writer assigned to Loki, and I volunteered for the initiative to start a community Helm maintainers group because I wanted to learn more about Helm.
Honestly, that's why Joe is here, because he's the one that knows the most about Helm out of the four of us. So we're here to ask him all the questions.
Yeah,
hope that doesn't put pressure on you.
And I will give Jay all the credit for starting the Loki Helm Maintainers Group, because historically, the Loki team internally running our SaaS product, we don't use Helm charts. We're using JSON and Tonka. So there's not as much Helm knowledge within Grafana as we would like. So Jay had the bright idea of why don't we bring on some community champions and try and get some help from the community to keep things going, because we, as a team, we knew we weren't keeping up with maintaining the Helm charts the way we should be.
100%. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I was actually going to ask, that's one of my first questions for you, Joe. How long have you actually been using Helm for? When did it all start? What was your sort of introduction to it?
Oh, we start with Helm where Helm 2 was new. Even maybe the old people also remember the Tiller age. So where Helm was split in two parts. It's 7-8 years ago. It's a really long time.
Yeah.
Can we talk about
technology? It is a long time.
Yeah, it is. But can we talk about what Helm is and what are the other alternatives to using Helm?
Yeah, so Helm was a great utility to, or it's a whole ecosystem to distribute software. So if you're looking at Kubernetes itself, we requires a lot of YAML manifests today, even more as 5 years ago. but there was no kind of package manager. So how to install a product like we know it from the Linux systems. Everyone may knows apt-get install Grafana, but this was missing for Kubernetes, and there was where Helm fits into the hole. And yeah, it's not the Helm command to install the program. It's also giving the ecosystem to create packages, having a repository where you can upload packages, end users can install the software artifacts, the packages, and Helm gives us also the ability to customize the package, so I can adjust the upstream package to my own needs. For example, adjust memory, adjust the host name of an ingress object, and this is a very good use case for Helm today.
So I'm assuming sort of under the hood then, when we look at kind of like a package of Helm, it's like a set of template files that kind of set like, and you are these template files basically just a bunch of like sort of like Kubernetes manifests that kind of like that will then, once you kind of branch these out with your own configuration points, if you choose to make your own modifications, they basically just run all of these onto your cluster to set up those like required resources that you need.
Yeah, so absolutely. So it's a set of Go templates. So the Go template engine is in the background, which has also some specificas that everyone has to be learned the years ago. And yeah, it's basically it's just a template engine for YAML files. And I also observe or people telling me that they are also using Helm to distribute other, for example, pipeline, GitHub Actions, or in Azure DevOps, they also YAML-based solutions, and they are also using Helm to distribute the pipeline definitions because the ecosystem is here with using charts, I can embed charts, I can upload the package files, and that's benefit. So it's Kubernetes is the main focus, but also people are starting to use Helm for other ecosystems.
That's super interesting. I did not know people would be doing that out with like the Kubernetes space. Yeah, very cool.
I didn't know it was possible because Helm was created for Kubernetes, right? That's why like even the name Helm refers to Kubernetes, but like I didn't know that was possible. But yeah, the reason that I got into Helm was for someone like me who's like a newbie in the space. I still feel like a newbie. I don't necessarily want to, I definitely don't want to do everything myself. Like if I want to use a project or a tool, I would rather kind of use this prepackaged thing that they already say, you know, this is where you should start. I would rather have that and have like all of the best practices done for me, because otherwise building that manifest file from scratch is like, oh my God, how do I know which option I should use really?
Yeah. I guess
absolutely.
What's I guess to start with a juicy question, what's some of the stuff that you find overall tricky with Helm or that you don't like? Is there any sort of like gotchas from the start that make that people should be aware of if they've not used Helm before?
So what's really really hard to learn is this Go template engine stuff. If we remember before Helm, we also used Ansible. And with Ansible, you have an other template engine, and that's more like you're using like an if condition. It's something like if condition 1 and condition 2. And if you remember on Helm's side, we have to define it like if, then the and, which act as a function here, and then condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. This is really, really a difference. And that's also we have also to teach developers, if they move from the dev position to a DevOps position, how this Helm template is working. It's very special that something like the Boolean operators are just functions.
Yeah, I mean I think it's been quite interesting trying to like contribute to the Loki Helm, and then as you as like the maintainers are feeding back, it's really interesting to hear, like, basically learning from you guys as we go through your reviews, because it is definitely a whole sort of new way of thinking when trying to build out these templates. And I think Andrea's got it right too. It's like the more generic we try to make it, the more complex it gets. It's
Absolutely. But that's the
Yeah.
same. That's the same to answer or to give a comment. It's the same on Terraform. So also generate Terraform modules are also really, really complex, and that's the same with Helm. And this is also why we are teaching, so that we are not accepting each pull request to fulfill the personal use cases. The opposite is that we are allowing to give end users the opportunity to just bypass, so they can define their own object as input, and then we're given the ability to just pass them to the chart. And this is why we not have the petition to fulfill each request to each single pull request that two users are using. That's the compromise.
And that keeps it usable for more people, right? Like, because if you can have a Helm chart that's super, super specific, but then other people, like if 90% of people aren't doing it in that particular way, then that's kind of useless for them, and they would just have to remove that stuff anyway. So we're trying to strike a balance here. The Helm charts that we maintain are supposed to be like the one that encompasses majority of people's use cases for Loki, while we still acknowledge that many people will need to put in their like more advanced config stuff. And maybe that leads us to the question too that Wellington F. Silva asks: what is the recommended values.yaml for Loki running in an EKS cluster, receiving logs from other clusters, and from some apps running in EC2 instances? And this is basically, I think this to be asking like which chart should people use? And our other Grafana champion who's in the chat here, Andre Ziviani, correctly identified that one of the things it depends on is the log volume. So this is super confusing. Julie was just saying before the call, like there has been a lot of confusion about which Helm chart to use for Loki.
Yeah, when I first got here about 3 years ago, it was actually December 2022, there were multiple Helm charts out there, and one of the Loki team members tried to make, there's actually a blog post for it if you Google like Loki blog, supposed to be the one chart to rule them all, making a Lord of the Rings joke there. And we tried to create a Helm chart that could address both our OSS customers and the Grafana Enterprise Logs customers. So all of that is in a chart where the source files live in the Loki repository, not over in the Helm charts repository. And that's the one that we've been maintaining, but there are 4 or 5 other Helm charts out there for Loki floating around, and those are not being maintained by this maintainers group. So just to clarify for people that might be using one of those other charts. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was an interesting one for me, and I think this is kind of sort of goes into our best practice questions that we had later for Jan. But like, I guess it's cool to talk about it now. Is like what I notice quite regularly in the community is like if you've tried to generate like a values file through say ChatGPT or something else, because historically we've had like, what is it, Loki distributed, Loki stack, then we had like, I'm sure there was one other Helm chart apart from the official Helm chart, which is now just Loki, that all of these are used to generate the values file versus like the actual official Loki chart. So I feel before we get into the actual top tips, that is top tip number 1 for everyone on the call. Make sure you're using the Loki Helm chart rather than Loki -distributed, which is super confusing because the naming convention for Tempo, Mimir, and Pyroscope, I think all have a -distributed on the end, but I might be wrong. So sorry about that, everyone. We did not need to make it confusing.
That's another thing to make people aware of, is the fact that the different teams are not as good at communicating. So our Helm charts are not going to look like the other teams necessarily, the other databases.
So sort of, I guess we bubble back up a little bit. Then we've sort of dove into a bit of what Helm is, and then we've talked a bit about like different Helm charts. I guess let's talk about what the Loki Helm chart actually is. And Joe, kind of maybe you could take us through a little bit of that. Is I guess in its most fundamental form, what's the purpose of the Loki Helm chart, and what's it designed there? What sort of components does it deploy as part of that chart?
Yeah, so good question. What is the Loki Helm chart? Generally, it's the official way to install Loki on a Kubernetes cluster, I would say, and it's some kind of all-in-one chart. So if you remember that Loki has 3 different installation variants. We know the single binary installation or the monolithic one, which fits well for single log volume. We have the simple scalable pattern, which is great for mid volume, and we have the fully distributed installation method, which is for everything above, I don't know, 200 gigabytes. There's a good documentation in the Loki documentation which says you which log volume you should, which installation method. And the great thing is if you are moving from, for example, single binary to distributed, you don't have to uninstall your Helm chart and maybe you have some data loss. Instead, you can keep the same Helm chart and also switch the modes from single to distributed. And that's the great advantage. So basically the Helm chart supports everything what Loki supports, and also includes some preview features like the Bloom stuff. That's, I guess, something what will become maybe in Loki 4, I guess, but can be tried out already.
Awesome. So I think that's like the cool thing about it is like knowing that you kind of have every single deployment method of Loki bundled in, and that's obviously what makes the Loki Helm complicated as maintainers to maintain, because you have so many different components that you need to understand and know that could potentially be rolled into a deployment versus as another Helm chart which might only have one method of deployment, which is like the set of components, and that's it. I guess sort of the in terms of when you started using the Loki Helm, do you kind of have any recommendations on where to start? Do you think someone should start with, say, like the monolithic version of the Loki Helm tethered to object storage, and then try the distributed? Do you sort of where do you think people should sort of begin when they first have a look at the Loki Helm?
Yeah, so I also started with the monolithic approach. It's called single binary approach in the Helm chart, and it also works well until you get issues. But it's always easier to start small and change your methods if you're getting issues. But because sometimes you are designing too big, too large, and which makes things really, really complicated because for example, distribution installation method is really, really complex. You have a lot of microservices, a lot of ports, a lot of metrics to observe. So this is my recommendation: start small and involve if you need. And this is also the same for resources. Don't over provision. Normally, you would also start in a development environment. So start small, observe, and increase the resources. For example, the memory limits if you need. It's really hard to estimate because don't forget, it's not only the log volume, the input. It's also the how you using Loki, how the developers are querying logs, and that is also depends on the RAM usage. So no one knows which queries are fired.
Yeah, so I concur with that. I think if you just want to kick the tires on Loki, just go single binary. But also, like, I run Loki locally for my own like home lab sort of stuff. Single binary is perfectly fine for that. And then there is and then the next one is distributed or the full microservices mode. And that one is the most advanced and most configurable, and it's the one that we would recommend for larger production volumes. But there is actually a middle point, and we maybe should mention this. We used to recommend simple scalable as like a midway point between the monolithic and the microservices one. But what we found was that it wasn't as useful as we wanted. It separated it into the read mode and the read path and the write path. And you could scale those as two things rather than individual components like in the microservices one. But that isn't getting the love from the team, because we've seen that the usage pattern is more going towards either single binary or distributed.
Yeah, and I see that there's an ongoing discussion about sizing over in the chat. There is a sizer cluster topic that got updated a couple of months ago. So that's about the most recent recommendations we have for sizing. But as always with all things that are configurable, the answer is always it depends.
I love that. That was the word I had to get used to when I joined at Grafana. It depends. It's always a tough one.
Anytime you work for a highly configurable product, the answer is always it depends.
It always depends. I'm like, no, give me the Goldilocks.
Yeah. Well, especially like the distributed one, right? Because you can size everything independently, and that's kind of why you would do that. But that's also a good use case for just taking the values that we put in the Helm chart, because that's a good starting point. If you don't really know, start with that and then tweak from there if you see any issues. So we always recommend is that when you deploy Loki, you also deploy meta monitoring. That's also in the repo. And that way it's not just like, this is it forever. You should be constantly monitoring it, because what we have seen as the average use case might not match yours. Actually, yours might be lower or higher or whatever, in ways that we can't predict.
And then you want to, change, twiddle with the dials and see what fits how your environment actually runs.
So that's actually a really good segue into our next questions, and that's kind of around best practices. And Joe, I think we've alluded to it a little bit there about saying, start with single binary, start small, look at resources. But what's your recommendations going into like an initial Loki Helm deployment, around sort of like cluster preparation, a little bit around sizing? How did you guys sort of go into it from your own deployments, and sort of object storage considerations as well? It would be great to hear sort of like how you guys sort of work with it at your own company. That'd be really cool to know.
Yeah, that's a good question. In the history, Loki was more considered as infrastructure project, as infrastructure component, which doesn't need so fine sizing requirements. So we had the platform must run, so we could use the resources that we had. But what I said, start small, so and observe. So this is a key point that Julie says, have great monitoring. So if your Loki provides alerts, for example, and rulings and dashboards, so if you set up Loki, also set up your monitoring and observe the needs. Also take care that you have a monitoring for your object storage. Not everyone can run on AWS or on Azure. For example, my current company that I work for runs on-premise completely. So our S3 is not unlimited like in AWS. And of course, we have to check for quotas, but it's not an issue. So we can do a quota increase, and our S3 has a size of terabytes. So it feels like unlimited, but it isn't unlimited. And don't overthink. It's easier to start, check, observe, improve, and that's the game you should play.
I like that, actually. Maybe we need to add that as like a slogan somewhere. It's like, just start, check, and improve. Like, I like the idea of like the dial fiddling, rather than like being like everything, all the stars need to align in the initial deployment and I'll never touch it again. Which is like, it's even the case for us internally. Like we have optimum deployments for Loki, but the team are constantly having to rejig and sort of give more capacity and reduce capacity, just depending upon like what people are doing in the tenancy. You've got noisy neighbors, you have, people doing some testing or adding, more. So yeah, I think
somebody's
it's one of those,
having a sale, somebody's having a product launch.
That's it. Black Friday is our big one for a lot of customers. That's the one where it's like, make sure everyone has a hand on the dial. Make sure we can use it. So I guess maybe like I could share my screen. I know I said I wasn't going to share a screen, but kind of the next question maybe is better.
I knew you were going to, Jay.
I know. from like a visual side. But I wonder if we could have a look at like the Helm values file, and we could just sort of discuss it all together and kind of have a look at the structure and sort of take people through it, so they can kind of understand what they're getting into. I'm trying to think, should we just go for like the example in our cloud deployment guide? Deployment guides.
I was gonna say too, though, like the Loki Helm chart that's in the repo is really good. But often when I want to deploy a whole stack, I also look at the Kubernetes monitoring Helm charts that are maintained internally as well. So we keep them in sync. But that one's better if you want to deploy not just Loki. Like if you want to deploy just the whole observability stack, it's a great place to start.
Sharing screen. And I'll make it bigger as we go. Oh, and then I'll bring this in. Can we all see that okay?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Good. So I guess sort of like starting from the top, maybe we should talk about the kind of the structure here, and how I think one of the biggest learning curves for me, and maybe we can all talk on it, is we obviously have a Loki configuration file, which is how how we actually provision Loki itself. But then we also have parts of the Helm that sort of just provision the overall deployment of Loki within your Kubernetes cluster. And I guess sort of maybe we could talk about how that separation occurs as well as we go through. What's actually just being written into the Loki config versus what's affecting the actual deployment of the Loki Helm. But I guess sort of like starting from the top, looking at the basics here, I guess if we work through it together, I guess we start with this section, which is inside the Loki parent tag. So basically what we're saying for most of this stuff in these parts, these are all inside the actual Loki config itself. And then if we look down, I find this is where, I don't know if Jan, if you can help with some of the templating here, when we kind of get to like this storage layer part here, like max query as storage, and sort of how we're defining storage here, where's sort of the separation lie between sort of like configuration in Loki versus the actual deployment?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And it's one, I think, where also the chart is not great at this point, but we are working on it. So everything what you currently see, I would say it's part of the Loki configuration. Even the ruler, the query, the storage type, everything we see here is Loki config. And then if you, correct, everything what you mark. But sometimes if they are not so equal. So if you remember the first one, the schema configs is something what is really, really specialized. It was the first or the second line on this code block.
I forgot this bit. Yes, schema config.
Yeah, for example, correct. And you see that is in camel case syntax, and then we have the storage config, which is snake case with the underscore. You can see it's not the same semantic of the name. And we are aware of this issue, and we can fully understand that end users are really confusing what is Loki config and what is not Loki config. the only chance to get this is go to the Loki configuration documentation and check if it's part of the Loki config or not.
That's actually a really good point. And so you can get to that through, if I remember correctly, configure, and it's the top parent configuration here. And this gives you all of the configuration parameters that are currently in the Loki config. So interestingly, if we do a search for here, we should find our storage config, which belongs in, and then this schema config style, I do not believe does. Which is part of
but you would find it as schema _config.
Yes. Yeah. I think this was like an interesting the case from when it all got migrated over. That there was definitely a lot of like key characters that just were not reflected verbatim, as you say, across into the config, which becomes problematic.
Maybe we can talk about storage for a bit, and also like Jay. By the way, Jay is showing the documentation for deploying on AWS. If you are deploying Loki on Kubernetes via Helm on AWS, Azure, or GCP, we have guides specifically for those cloud providers, because they're all slightly different, like what storage they use and how they handle authentication. So check out the documentation on that, because that one will guide you through it more rather than just doing the Helm chart. There's a bunch of other things that you have to do, so check those out. And Jay also has videos on AWS and Azure. I haven't done my GCP one, but that will come soon. But Jay, do you want to talk about the storage for a second?
Yeah, 100%. So I think like we kind of sort of alluded a bit to the storage here as part of the Loki config. I think the main thing to keep in mind is there's currently two methods that we support inside the Loki Helm. There's the classic method, which I'm going to call it, which is the method that we show here, which is basically defining your bucket names, your chunk ruler, and defining your S3 type storage. And then there's the new method, which uses Thanos API. We will eventually migrate everyone across to, well, I say we're not going to physically migrate everyone across, but we're hoping that will become the new standard by Loki 4.0, which would be the Thanos API for storage for all. So it's something to keep in mind. I guess that's something we need to decide as part of the maintainers, Joe, like how we maintain support, whether we slowly deprecate the old version out. But that's one thing to keep in mind in terms of storage and interacting with object storage. A couple of other gotchas to keep in mind as well from a storage point of view. So at the moment, with the Loki Helm, we include for your testing abilities MinIO. And there's obviously been, some developments in MinIO that mean that they no longer build their containers anymore. So that means, unfortunately, MinIO, in that case, we can't keep as a, object storage for testing. So our recommendation at the moment is, if you're going to be testing with Loki, that you're going to have to provision your own object storage and have that ready to go before you begin. So yeah, I definitely advise checking out our cloud setup guides, or if you are like Joe, and basically Joe, what object storage do you use locally, since you are a local user of Loki?
Yeah, one of few. Our storage in our company is S3 compatible. So we are using some S3. It's not an open source product, so because it's really the main storage in our company, and it's a really big one. It scales a lot, so it's some proprietary product.
Got it.
I guess it's named Pure S3. I don't know. But we are just end users of this S3 solution, and for us it just works. It also supports all the stuff like versioning, like replication to another data center, and
Dang. Okay. So yeah. So I guess from an open source side, maybe that might be too expensive for the open source community.
Right.
Yeah. But
But
before we
what
get off, sorry, go ahead,
what
Jeff.
yeah, so what I also can recommend for just start with Loki and just test it out. Loki also supports local data. So if you start with Loki, you don't need an object store. So single binary with a local path works fine to find out if Loki is working for you.
Yeah, and I just want to mention before we get off the subject of MinIO, if people haven't been following this, the last Docker image that they built has a CVE in it, which is part of the reason why it became sort of a big thing, because people wanted to ask about getting the fix for the CVE, and were told that they weren't building images anymore. So if you were unaware of that happening, just a little warning.
Yeah, that's something that we're trying to figure out. Like we try to include in the Helm chart open source tools like MinIO, but then if they're not going to be building that image anymore, then we are looking for alternatives, and it isn't going to be something that's proprietary. So we're looking at alternatives right now. And if someone watching this has an alternative open source one that they already use as an object store and it's going well with Loki, maybe let us know too, because we're open to that. Like, this is the group to tell.
Yeah, I think we've said we've looked into alternatives like Garage and Seaweed, FS, and there's a few others out there that we haven't tested yet. So yeah, if there's others that you see that are usable, let us know. I think is it Seaweed? I might have the wrong.
No, that's right. It is Seaweed FS. We have a quick question here from Vishwanath Bhatt that's not strictly about Helm, but is about Loki. How do you bring visibility over logs across large clusters? I'm not referring to cardinality here, but more about log patterns helping teams understand how much of their logs are potentially redundant. And they go on to talk about how they want to give teams better insights based on the logs. Since they mentioned log patterns, I would say logs drill down, actually. Because if you just want to find out, like if you don't really know what you're looking for and you kind of just want to see what are the logs that we have and what patterns do they fall under, that's the perfect use case, I think, for logs drill down. So if you pull down the latest version of Grafana, that should already come with it. And I'm talking about the open source version, but of course it's also available on Grafana Cloud.
Yeah, and
it's Seaweed FS, like as in the sea.
Sorry, that was my bad pronunciation. To pivot a little bit back to the values config again, so we kind of discussed what's in the actual Loki config itself. But to finish off, I think it'd be good to sort of look at the second parts, and I guess sort of Joe, could you sort of take us through this part of the deployment and sort of, you know, what are we actually configuring here within the Helm, and how are these being deployed sort of from a template level?
Yeah, sure. So if you are talking about the deployment mode, it's, for example, distributed here. That's the first decision if you start with Loki, how I want to which installation method I should use for Loki. And this example shows distributed. We also have the SSD, the simple scalable, and the single binary. And then if we are looking on the next lines, ingester, carrier frontend, that's all the name of the Loki components. And then you can also choose if you want the name replica, max unavailable for the pod disruption budget configuration. But you can also configure the resource needs, so CPU, memory, disk usage if needed. And that's the real thing. In distributed, you can scale each component. That depends on your needs.
Nice. Yeah. And I guess the other things which is like ingesters can have PVCs attached. That's for like their write ahead logs. I'm trying to remember. The rulers can have PVC. And there's one other compactor. No, I don't think the compactor needs to have PVC anymore. But I'm trying to think. So some obviously some of the components basically use local storage to basically retain state, and we call those the. I guess that's probably actually a really good question, because this has affected us as we sort of create updates for the Loki Helm. There's this idea of stateful sets, and then sometimes when you're having to make changes to the Loki Helm, it affects a stateful set, which means you have to kind of orphan those containers and then spin up new ones. So I guess, Joe, could you sort of describe what a stateful set is and how they're kind of used here, and sort of what that means when we have to update part of like the Loki Helm config to accommodate a new configuration?
Yeah, sure. So from Kubernetes point of view, we have two main resources to schedule our pods in the Kubernetes cluster. So the most is deployment. So deployment is the classical, how this is my pod spec. I would like to have this 3 times, and they're basically done. And then in deployment, I can also configure which volume I want to use, and then every pods get this single volume. And this can be problematic if, for example, if a pod is, or if a volume is only allowed to bind to one pod. It's a conflict with the scaling, because if I scale up my pod to 3 replica, but I'm not able to scale up my volume because my volume is only allowed to have to be on one pod. In that case, I need a stateful set, because a stateful set has the main ability to create a volume claim on request. So for example, in the stateful set, there is a volume template definition, and each time I scale up, the stateful set takes care that a persistent volume claim is created as well. And the infrastructure on Kubernetes level is responsible for create and schedule the volume. And at the end, I have for each replica a dedicated volume. This is what normally every application needs and expect, an own volume store for its own, and no shared volume. And the downside of the stateful sets is that some fields are immutable. We are only allowed to modify, for example, the pod spec, but we are not allowed to modify how the stateful set is updated on a new update. For example, there are strategies like one pod is go up, then the next one goes down and goes up. But there's also some kind of parallel strategy where I can tell the stateful set controller, hey, please do 3 pods in a row, then wait, and then 3 pods in a row again. But this configuration is immutable and can be only defined on creation. And the whole situation at Loki is that our chart has a long history, and maybe not every decision was good in history, but also we have new features in Kubernetes and new learnings. And at some point, we have to change immutable fields to have to keep a best practice value, and to have new users and new installations in the good practice mode, which it costs that existing deployments needs a manual step for the upgrade. And that's the reason why sometimes we announce that please delete your stateful set, but it's only the stateful set object. It's not the persistent volume claims that is deleted, so no data lost. It's just please delete the stateful set, and then the Helm upgrade is coming with the new version of the stateful set. So it's basically a Kubernetes restriction.
That is one of the best explanations I've heard from the ground up. Thank you, Joe. I've really appreciated that, because I feel like I've learned better today the relationship between stateful sets and.
Yeah, me too. I thought that was actually pretty good. So much about understanding Helm is about understanding Kubernetes, and it's like I've used it in anger, and I still don't quite get a lot of nuances. It's quite complex. I also wanted to mention, Julie actually wanted to mention. You could say it.
Yeah, so we've been looking at this one example in the documentation, but there's also documentation in the Loki values file. When we updated to 3.0, one of the Loki engineers went in and put a lot of code commenting in here to try and be helpful. And I tend to look at this file a lot when I'm trying to figure things out. I'm like, what are the comments in here? So if people haven't gone into, if they've only been looking at the documentation and haven't gone in to look at the repo, this is another resource for you.
Yeah, 100%. The comments are actually really good in there and kind of give you a bit of a thought pattern into some of the decisions made as well, which is good to know because it kind of sees where the Loki headspace was at that point of the development process. So I guess we've talked a lot about the Loki Helm in its form and kind of some of the best practices. What I'd like to get to in the last sort of leg of our community call is really the community side here. It's like this is really much being led by the Loki maintainers. We currently have 5, and I kind of we've been. How many are we actually up to now? We must have accepted over 100, Julie. Like it's been. I think it's been.
We have merged. Let me check my notes.
Or
Here.
at least
Yeah, we're getting close to having merged 100 PRs since we kicked this off, and it was supposed to be a pilot, but I would say this has been wildly successful.
Yeah. So I guess, but with all of those PRs in place, I guess, Joe, what is from when you started reviewing the PRs from the community, what some of the biggest changes you've seen? I think it was around 6.34 that you guys sort of started and sort of merged. What's some of the ones that have you've been really excited about and think it's good for the community to know about?
I could remember that we had a pull request that introduces a layer 2 caching in the Loki Helm Chart, which was not really part of the documentation. It was not an experimental feature, and I was a bit impressed because he also just not add new templates and done. So he tried to reuse the existing templates because the caching is something that we are using on the results cache too. So it's query cache and results cache. And so he was able to create one central template, and then we could reuse this Redis templates on all places. And that was a really great feature.
Amazing.
What drives you to contribute so much? Because you really have contributed a lot to the Loki Helm chart. Like, I know personally, I don't merge anything unless you've given your okay. Because there's something I'm like, oh, it looks good, and you say like, yeah, but the best practices are this. I'm like, oh, okay, let's wait for Joe. But what drives you to put in so much work?
It's so the main it's fun. So I have fun reviewing pull requests. Also I learned something new sometimes, and it's not feeling so much work from my point of view. I'm doing this for years already. I'm also having a lot of experience from the Prometheus ecosystem, and even if there is a bigger PR to review, there's I have no problem to check this code out and create a client cluster locally. So client cluster create. I have a temporary Kubernetes cluster, run the Helm upgrade command, Helm upgrade -i, and then that's the way I can do some kind of integration test. So does this work really, this change? But the other PRs, like for example, adding a new line for a new config section, that's something that I'm looking to it. Okay, it fits, and then I giving my looks good to me comment. So it really depends, and there's a lot of experience that work. And we could remember we had also situations where it may not fit well. So I also am doing mistakes, but we recover from it. So then we had one failed Helm release, and I could remember that we are doing a hotfix a day after, and it was fine as well. So
Yeah,
it's basically the not 100% correct because it's a community thing.
100%.
No one pays money for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely fair. The I guess sort of like so I think you've alluded to it there. So if people are keen to actually contribute to the Helm chart themselves, what's some advice for them to get started? Kind of how like what sort of testing processes would you say? Kind of how do you sort of dive into the template files? Where should someone start?
Yeah, so the best way to start to contribute is that if you have a problem that you want to solve. And in history, many engineers trying to evolve their own problems by copy and own. So they fork the chart into the internal company and adjust things. But with the downside, hey, I can never upgrade anymore. And so if you have an issue, just start to contribute and don't overthink. We don't buy it, and errors are okay. And then we are doing a review, and everything is good. So it's the same answer that we had minutes ago. Don't overthink. Just start. And that's the way. If you do it more and more and more, at some point you feel confident to just create a pull request and blah blah, and it takes 1 week and then the PS merged.
I really like that.
And
what are some of the things that you would look at when you're reviewing a pull request? Like are there common things that people don't do or think about that you're always like, yeah, you need to do this first?
Yeah, so we all know that YAML is hard in terms of intent. So I'm looking if it's if the intention is correct, but also I'm looking for some best practices. Sometimes it's the with block and then just a dot. For example, it's way more common that having the if values dot, I don't know, resources, and then in the to YAML block again the values dot resources. So it's because if you have it declared twice, there's still room for mistakes that the second declaration is wrong. So and that is why I'm mostly recommend to use the with block. And at some point, I'm also not going for best practices because consistency is more important than best practice. For example, if there's an issue, for example, a very cosmetic issue in the Helm chart, then it's really more important that continue this cosmetic issue instead having one place that behaves differently. So consistency is really, I guess we could remember a discussion, Jay. It was the first days where we discussed about consistency, and that is really important.
Yeah. I think that this was making sure that like across the board, like if we've changed one aspect of the Loki, it reflects every single component that is reflected in the same way. I guess that's actually really alludes well onto the kind of our final questions from you. The I guess when we initially sort of started having that discussion where all of us got together and we talked about the future of the Loki Helm chart. We said right now we're quite happy to be like stewards and sort of maintain kind of what we have and bring new stuff in. But there's obviously lots of things that you think that maybe need to change or come out or go in. Looking along when we sort of release Loki 4.0 and we start looking potentially at a fresh Helm chart change there where we could do a major version change. Is there what some of the things that you think that we should potentially change in the Loki Helm chart? Obviously, we're not holding anyone on the call to any of it. It's just more of a discussion point to get the community ideas flowing. What's some of your thoughts?
Yeah, so that is something that also we discussed minutes ago. It's the part, what is Loki config, what is Kubernetes config, and it should be more clearly visible what is config. And I also would more recommend that we should allow everything what Loki allows. So it's not like adding an own wrappers or adding own checks. It's like this storage block where we give end users the chance to configure the storage and then configure a name for the chunks, for the ruler, and for the enterprise gateway. But this is a configuration pattern that Loki does not support. It's something in between. I call it sometimes it's just magic that someone's only understand if he looks in the source code, and that's something that we should avoid in the future. And this is what I'm trying for Loki for, that we are getting a clean cut, having a point, having an eye on consistency, maybe some. I could remember that you're also supporting migrations from the old chart. That is maybe also a good time to cut it if we are able to. But this configuration part is, I guess, a really frustrating point for the most local users.
Yeah, 100%. I think that would be the thing. It's like, I think we've given enough leeway now for the old charts that we can potentially look at cutting a lot of those migration parts across. And yeah, I think that's it. That was being my biggest gripe learning it, especially with one of the things that me and Nicole talk about all the time is what is truly part of the Loki config right now and what is just me deploying parts of the Loki components to the Helm. And it's really hard sometimes to unpick them apart from the method that you've said, which is like, does this currently exist in the Loki configuration docs? If not, probably something Helm related. So yeah, super cool. And I think we kind of discussed a little bit around sort of whether we keep sort of like third-party solutions in as well. How clean we can keep the Helm with. I think a big one that's come up quite a lot is CADA support and things like that. And that's something that's kind of like regularly used in and amongst the community. It's obviously something that we have to like learn to support. It's been in the Helm for a while, but I guess those are the types of things that we need to decide as a community whether these get taken forward or we sort of let other people sort of extend the Helm with those types of supports themselves. Yeah.
What do you think about that, Joe, by the way? Like, should we include KDA? And for that matter, what about things like, Carpenter?
Yeah. So from the Helm Chart perspective and maintainer perspective, I would say yes, we should support KDA, but we should also give a warning that this configuration section is untested because we are not able to test the KDA compatibility in our view. And this is so the trade-off. Yes, we support this, but it's with a community flag. So use it on your own risk and deal with breaking changes if we have to, because we haven't large knowledge in KDA, for example. And I guess that is make it transparent, that support is limited, and I guess then it's fine.
Nice. I like that. That's a good middle ground because there is actually some very enthusiastic contributors of KDA. So I always feel bad. I'm always like, yeah, we will try our best to accommodate and get those PRs in. We just do not have the expertise to test them. So, but yeah, I think that's an awesome middle ground to put it in.
And the same
Andre
for
also has...
Cilium. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Andre has this point. You also had an external dependency for Loki to scale.
Yeah. So that is what we should archive. So we should make it possible that all the external scalers can be hooked, for example, because sometimes special annotations are necessary or special configurations are necessary, and this is more that we should compatible to external solutions
rather than directly integrating them into the
correct
values file itself. That's a good point. Thank you, Andrea. As always, I love having Andrea on the call. He's like our full tech support in the side, so he's fantastic. So I think that kind of brings us to the end. I've been so pleased to get this one, and Joe, like, thank you so much for coming on to do this. This is voluntary for you, and it's out of your day to come and do this for an hour with us, let alone sort of review and maintain our Helm chart. So yeah, I just wanted to give us a sincere thank you from us and in general from Grafana Labs as well, because having your support to help the community here. Yeah. So I think we even said one of the other releases that we had, like a majority of the big features that went in were Helm features. So it's really good to see that, the Helm maintainers group is actually really pushing for new features and new functionality for Loki, while the engineering team is pushing for Loki 4.0. So it's really, keeping the project going, which is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Great. I'm nice to see that community work is visible, and it's not always happens. But I'm really happy to hear this.
Awesome. Right. I think that's Nicole, Julie, do you have anything to send us off with? Anything to finish it up?
No, not really. Just thank you to the Grafana champions, and also in particular to Loki Helm maintainers. There are 4 others that are on the maintainers group, but these people are not employed by Grafana. They're just people like Joe who think it's fun to review pull requests, and I'm so grateful because the whole community learns from people like that. So just wanted to say thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but
Right.
I will point out, if you're in the Slack channel, there is an OSS 101 channel now. If you're interested in getting involved in open source work, there's some sort of tips in there on how to get started.
Oh, thank you, Judy. I have not been in that channel yet, and that's actually pretty bad. So I am going to go into that channel now.
If you want to become a champion, there we do have this page, grafana.com/community/champions, to be like Joe. Well, Joe's like an extra, like ex-champion plus. There are tiers now.
Fantastic. Right. Well, we will let everyone have the rest of their day. And thank you all so much. We'll be back, I think, for one more, a Christmas special. Well, sorry, we've got November and then maybe December. I wonder, Nicole, if we just do December as a Loki pub quiz. We just do like see what you've learned over the last year, and then we'll hand out some swag or something to the person who gets the most questions.
Oh no, Jay, don't mention that on stream. Now we're committed.
No, we're not committing. Nothing said on stream is committal.
Jay said he will personally fund this.
Stickers are cheap.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thank you, everyone.
See you next time. All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye.